There are several actors that are good at one type of character. Maybe it's the tough guy, the comic relief, or even the creepy person that seems to always be around. While typecasting a person is never good, sometimes it's just what that person is best at. Today we are going to look at actors who are really good at one thing, but were put in roles that they just didn't really fit. I'm Ollamh, and welcome to 5 Count Friday.
You think you know me? You think you can catch me? You think you can trust me? Nobody knows the secret that I keep deep in my soul.
Kevin Costner is a good actor, but he's very obviously an American actor. He just screams all-American good guy, which is why he is best in westerns and sports movies. It's easy to see him in the role of a tough type of man just doing what needs to be done to get by. What isn't easy to see is him being a rich nobleman, used to the easy life, and thrown into the life of an outlaw. That didn't stop Warner Brothers Studios from casting him as Robin Hood. He plays the character of an outlaw just fine, but he just doesn't feel like he was ever used to the high life. His clean-cut appearance stands out when the character is supposed to be living on the fringe out in the forest. Of course, you also can't help but wonder about how a painfully obvious 30-year-old California man is supposed to be English. He makes no attempt at the accent, and the mannerisms that should be there are sorely missing. He's had a lot of great roles. Personally, I loved his version of Wyatt Earp, but he just doesn't match anything about Robin Hood. Johnny Depp has been in the acting game for a long time. His first credit is from 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street. He's played a lot of different characters with a variety of styles, but lately he's focused more and more on the wacky, zany character. It almost feels like Jack Sparrow bleeds through into a lot of his acting. Now, some of the characters are fine with that, but there is one that really didn't need it and suffered for it: Tonto. The Native American companion to the Lone Ranger, Tonto was always portrayed as being a serious person. The stories being set in a time that was very rough for the indigenous people, seeing someone with a bird on his head and very disconnected with the real world just isn't realistic. It's not even like he's completely unable to play a serious character. He's done it before and since. Why Tonto had to be a Sparrow-esque character is not only confusing, but also partially infuriating, especially if you're familiar with the Lone Ranger. Much like Costner, John Wayne had a very specific style. He was always the tough, no-nonsense character. There's a reason he always played a cowboy or a soldier. It was just his specific style. With his slow, gravelly voice that always had that western twang, most of his roles were almost made for the man. There are some rather striking examples of how he couldn't play anything else, such as The Greatest Story Ever Told. Now, the story of Jesus is never really cast honestly. Let's face it, the cast is always too pale. But casting the quintessential American cowboy as a Roman centurion is troubling. The accent alone is a slap in the face to a person's suspension of disbelief. Of course, the biggest miscasting of Wayne was 9 years earlier when he played a famous historical figure, Temujin, otherwise known as Genghis Khan. How anyone thought for a moment that John frickin' Wayne could play an Asian warlord with any believability is mind-boggling. In later years, Wayne regretted the role to the point of visibly shaking when the film was named. It was also marked as the reason RKO Radio Pictures folded and the end of Howard Hughes' 30-year involvement in the film industry. Being born to a French diplomat in New York and then growing up in Switzerland makes for an interesting development and a curious accent. While Christopher Lambert is a man of many countries, there are some rather specific countries that he does not fit in. For example, he could play the part of a thunder god pretty well in almost any European religion, but doing so from Japanese mythology just doesn't quite mesh. That didn't prevent him from playing Raiden in the Mortal Kombat film. While he was known for action movies such as Highlander, the role had him in an advisory capacity. He didn't really do any fighting, despite the character being one of the original fighters in the game. Speaking of the Highlander series, he's not really well suited for playing a Scotsman. He can pull off the accent a little bit, but there's always his natural accent that pulls away from the believability. The character is most heavily recognized as being Lambert, but I think that's more because it was a new character and not an established one. Though this does take us into our number one spot. Sean Connery is a legend in the film industry, but he's always had a thick Scottish accent. For the most part, that isn't much of an issue. James Bond being Scottish isn't that much of a stretch. But when he's playing other roles, it is confusing, but almost never actually referenced. It seemed like we were always supposed to ignore the accent no matter what character he was playing. A prime example is again Highlander, where Connery plays an Egyptian turned Spaniard. That is confusing in and of itself, but when that character has a more Scottish accent than the character who is supposed to be Scottish, there's a problem. It might be that Ramirez has spent enough time in Scotland that he's gone native, but he doesn't dress in Scottish fashion. Of course, one of the most grating, for me anyways, examples of a film studio expecting us to ignore the man's accent is The Hunt for Red October. Playing the captain of a brand new Russian submarine is the last place you would expect to hear a thick Scottish brogue. This is a top secret military vehicle. That's not something that would be given to a foreign recruit of any rank. But I guess we're not supposed to question it. So there are our 5 picks for actors that got roles despite not really matching up to their strengths. Which was the most confusing for you? Was there one on the list that you fully accepted? Is there one that you would have mentioned that we didn't? Leave a comment down below, send us a tweet or a post on our Facebook page, and let us know. As always, thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to prod the subscribe button down below so that you can stay tuned for more from Ollamh Productions. Cheerio!
Did when I picked up the last thing of fresh water that was here, I just dumped it, didn't I? I was an idiot. Wow.
Thing down to wait, I have to wonder about this plan. As much as Dylan is a jerk and the obvious bad guy, he's right about moving out.